Welcome to another exciting episode of Zanaco Unplugged, the podcast series that takes us inside Zambia's biggest bank and brings us conversations with business and creative leaders as well as pioneers. As we take these topics that range from leadership, tech, innovation, and sustainability, these are relevant to businesses as well as SMEs, but interestingly also the corporate space. Today we have another exciting conversation which I am super excited to be sharing with you. My name is Rose Sibisi, your host for season 2 of Zanaco Unplugged, at a time when Zanaco celebrates 55 years of service excellence. So who am I talking to today? I have the privilege of having on set with me today Ms. Rabecca Hichilo Silolezia, Associate Director and Sustainability Leader at PwC Zambia this morning. How are you doing today, Ms. Rabecca?
I'm well, Rose. Thank you. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm so happy to have you here.
I'm equally happy to be
here.
Good.
And we cannot be talking sustainability and finance without having with us also Mr. Austin Chijikwa, my good friend, head of business banking here at Zanaco. How are you doing, Austin?
I love the energy. I'm very glad to be here.
We've got a lot of energy here at Zanaco, and especially with what we want to talk about today. I know that you're so passionate about that.
No, definitely.
Yeah, for sure. So I would like us to kick off with you, Rabecca, because when we think about sustainability, what is the case for sustainability in a business, especially including SMEs? What is the case for SMEs in embarking on a sustainability reporting journey? What would you say?
Thank you for that question, Rose. So the business case for sustainability is really premised on the fact that every business, regardless of whether it's big or small, has an impact. True. And the impact is either on the environment, on the social environment that the business operates in, and also the governance that it puts in place. Okay. So the imperative for business to implement sustainability strategies is in ensuring that they build resilience. So sustainability in its simplest form is ensuring that we meet our needs today, okay, but also ensuring that we also protect the future generations to meet their needs as well. So if you think about a business, how are you building a business that is going to sustain and survive into the future generations to equally benefit from what the business has been built on? So a business has to think about, what is the environment that I'm operating in, and can I sustain my business into the future? Now, that consideration has to look into who are my stakeholders and how am I impacting all these different stakeholders, because ultimately those are the ones that help the business create value.
I love that you speak about big and small businesses, because even from an entrepreneur perspective, small businesses think we don't really need to think that big or that high, because this big sustainability word or action shouldn't really affect us. But then with what you bring out, knowing that it actually impacts on all types of businesses, comes in the finance issue, Austin. So I'm just asking, when we hear sustainable financing, what activities can a business or a small business as well as a corporate be considered sustainable, and how does that link to getting financing?
As you know, thanks for the question, right? And I'd like to just step back a little bit, right?
Okay.
And really ride on Rebecca's definition of what sustainability actually is.
Yeah.
The definition that I like is that a corporation or a small business is sustainable if it engages with its stakeholders in a non-destructive and a long-term value-creating manner.
Okay.
And typically what has happened is most businesses consider just a very narrow view of who their stakeholders are. And typically that's who provides capital, right? So as a business owner, your expectation is that you put capital into a business and that you're going to get your money back in the form of profits and just recovery of your investment. And if you borrow money, then the bank's a stakeholder. And typically businesses are regarded as sustainable if they can continue to run that cycle, investment, return, etc. But I think what happens is you're only considering one stakeholder, and there's two stakeholders you have to also add on.
Okay.
There's the natural environment, or natural environment or nature. So when you are a farmer, as an example, to produce maize requires that you buy seed,
Okay.
right?
That's the cycle.
That you plant in.
Mm-hmm.
But then you're relying that the earth will give you good soil and it will give you rain. And you don't actually factor that into your production, like how you think about what actually takes to run your business.
Okay.
But what if nature doesn't give you good soils and doesn't give you rain? So you can't keep on taking. So in the same way you can't take. In the same way you can't keep on taking from the owner of a business and not give them back profits. You can't keep on taking from nature without putting something back. Then there's also the society as well. Like speaking to ESG, right? Like your workers come from society. You don't exist in an island. So you're actually drawing resources from society. So if you have low-paying jobs, if you don't give opportunities to youth, what will happen is you lose what they call a social license to operate.
Okay.
Where like the community doesn't just
It's a
like
moral
you.
issue now.
Someone like the community doesn't like you. So what happens is sometimes you find that social unrest. You find that perhaps the community rises against you, and you've seen this actually happen, right? So I think it's important. Like I think that's for corporations to think of sustainability in that manner, right? And I think you had asked about, okay, how does that come to finance?
Yeah.
Right. So businesses, essentially all businesses do one of two, like do this, like they take inputs, they convert them into an output, and they hope that a customer can pay a higher price than what it costs to produce, right? Now, coming back to the stakeholder conversation, the issue, you have to look and say, look, where are the opportunities and risks within those stakeholders, and how can I take advantage of them, or where can I reduce risk?
Okay.
Most of the time, it will have an investment cost.
That is usually probably overlooked.
Yes, exactly. Someone has to pay for it. So if you're a farmer and you have to say, look, I want to give back to the soil. So on this piece of land, I won't plant anything next year. Compared to your colleague who plants the whole area, you have less maize, for example, to sell.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
And so like you're actually giving up income. If you want to stop using a vehicle, like you want to stop using generators, you want to go solar. You have to buy a panel. You have to buy batteries. The whole system. It might actually cost you more than a diesel generator. So most of the times, going green or going social has some cost.
Right.
So the question is, how do you finance it? And that's what sustainable financing is actually about. And we can go in. We can. I know.
And maybe I could add to the example that Austin touched on in terms of agriculture. So coming back to the definition around sustainability, building a sustainable business is about resilience, right? So if we think about the climate that we're in right now, we've been severely impacted by a drought.
Yes, we have.
And so a business that is a traditional farming business that is supplying ShopRite, for example, is going to be expected to think differently, because at the end of the day, there's a ShopRite that is expecting you to provide those sweet peppers, those English cucumbers, and those are very climate, sensitive products.
And seasonal as well.
Exactly, and seasonal. So with all these changes in our climate, environment, how do you still maintain your production whilst making sure that you're climate proofing how you're producing your products? That requires investment, as Austin has provided. And what that means is that businesses need to think long term.
Yeah.
The investment that you're going to make now is going to ensure that you sustain that supply chain into ShopRite, and that somebody else won't come in and take your space, because that is what will happen. You fail to provide your product to ShopRite for its customers, somebody else will take up that space.
Yeah,
so businesses need to think about building resilience and what risks are ultimately presented in their ability to continue to provide that service or product to their customers.
I like that you've already partially answered my next question to you, because you're already touching on how companies can balance financial returns with positive environmental and social impact. But from a PwC perspective, you recently launched your report on the state of sustainability reporting. And just piggybacking on what Austin has already brought out in terms of being very conscious, whether you're a small business or you're a big business, you have to track where your investment is at from the time that you plant it, using the analogy of the farming seed that he referred to.
Right.
What would you say is needed for companies to balance financial returns with the positive environmental and social impact?
Absolutely. So for companies to make this balance, it's critical to recognize that they have to start this journey, right? Now, to start this journey, they have to set their ambitions. And it's not for every business to do the same things. And that's maybe where the investments become costly, because maybe you're trying to do what that company is doing instead of coming up with something that is specific and tailored to your stakeholders, right? So when you come up with that ambition that is supported by your stakeholders' input, you can then identify funding opportunities, whether it's low interest financing that the banks might provide, such as Zanaco, or impact investors. We're seeing a lot of funding that is coming through, whether it's through, DFIs, development finance institutions, or even through the government itself, ultimately receiving funding from the Green Climate Fund, as an example. I think all the different COPs, especially the most recent ones, have made significant pledges to the developing nations. So now, how does that trickle down to that small business that is looking for that funding? And the key for our small businesses, or even just any business in general, is in identifying, how do I embed these strategies, the ESG strategies, into my business? And then how do I then use that to obtain this funding that is available? And a lot of businesses are doing a lot. They're doing a lot of work on the S side, even on the G side, and some activities also on the environmental side, but then are just not able to package it into a story that they can then come and present to Zanaco and say, you know what, I believe our business ticks all these boxes. And if it doesn't tick all the boxes, where are the gaps? And what journey do we need to take to meet that expectation to access this type of funding? So the balancing then happens in recognizing that the integration of ESG into business strategy has to happen for the ultimate goal of taking advantage of the opportunities that come in on the financing side.
Love it, love it, love it. And earlier on, I think the three of us were having some chat around the banter of terminologies.
Yeah.
So there's this big word, sustainability, and then we're talking, you referred to ESG. But Austin, what does it really mean for a business to be sustainable? Can you simplify the definition of what sustainability is to a business?
All right, cool. No, thanks a lot. And let me write on Rebecca's last comments, right? So yeah, then there's a plethora of definitions, and it can be quite confusing.
Yeah.
I've been getting to a stage where I could comfortably talk about this. I mean, it's been a steep learning curve, and I can imagine for business as well. So to make it practical for business, right?
Yeah.
So let's use the ESG, like themes and acronyms.
So let's break down ESG. What is ESG?
ESG, right? So ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance.
Right.
So those are principles that in sustainability that I think a company or a business can kind of focus on, right?
Okay.
So if we look at environmental, the idea here is, speaking to our earlier commissioner on stakeholders, this is nature. Like, how do we give back to nature, or how do we ensure that we're engaging in nature in a sustainable way? There's different types of business in different industries, so there's different opportunities, right? So for example, one of the themes is renewable energy, all right? So activities that generate electricity, right, from a renewable resource like solar or wind or hydro, at least run of water, can be regarded as sustainable. So an activity that actually results in the generation of electricity using those methods is sustainable. So if you're in that space, it means that you've ticked that box, right? But then there are other themes as well, and I won't run through all of them. I will share some places where you can actually confirm this. But just as an example, so there's renewable energy, there's pollution control, right? So we all industry have some sort of pollution. Right? Either it's the wastes, either it's emissions that can come from using fossil fuel, right? Reducing how much waste you generate is regarded as sustainable.
Okay.
Right. So, for example, if you say that you have let's say you've got a milling plant, right? And you power it using generators, so you use perhaps X amount of diesel.
Okay.
Right.
Right.
implementing a technology that allows you to completely stop using diesel or significantly reduce the diesel means you're becoming green, like it's sustainable. So that means that qualifies, right? And there's different areas. So there's circular economy, which like recycling materials or being more efficient about how you use resources. Simple things like, water that you use at your office or in your plant, using less water.
It's the simple things, really.
Exactly.
Sounds like, yeah.
Exactly. So like there's different categories. The Green Bond Guidelines, at least in Zambia, is one resource you can look. There's an appendix to the Green Bond Guidelines that actually lists the activities that can consider green. Let's look at S quickly as well. When it comes to S, it's about outcomes.
Okay.
Right? So the Sustainable Development Goals is a good place to start from. And they're trying to achieve certain things. Like, for example, they want to reduce gender inequality. Right?
And we're getting very close to 2030.
Yes, and we are, right? So like if let's say you're in your work, you are reducing the gender inequality gap by offering more employment to women. That is you're ticking the box. So then and to a point, it's an issue now. How do you package that story? And also how do you become more deliberate? So you look, I want to let's say you can set a target and say I want to have 50% of my staff balance between male and female, and you start working towards that. It's about how many youth have you employed, how many in agriculture, how many farmers have you reached, especially smallholder farmers, so there's in S,
so there's always a target.
In S, about an outcome, achieving an outcome.
Okay.
Yeah, whereas in the E, there's categories that like you can see, where do I fit in, which area am I playing in, am I in clean transport, so that's essentially that's what I think a business should kind of focus on. So when they look at those categories and say, where am I and what action am I taking that's actually having a positive impact in these particular areas, and then build your story.
And on that note of building a story, I like that you referred to the sustainability drive being a journey. So this is where I wanted you to quickly just touch on as we come to a close.
Sure.
In terms of the sustainability reporting landscape in Zambia, Austin has done a good job just explaining to us what it really is. But what should a business in Zambia consider in starting their sustainability reporting journey? So that at least we can also all look good in your PwC sustainability report.
No, absolutely. And thanks for that, Rose. It's a journey. And no business, if you look at even the giants like Apple, they're also on a journey, right? So nobody's expected to have it all figured out immediately. So, but the idea is that to start this journey, you must set that ambition. And Austin really touched on the different ambitions that exist in the E, the environmental, social, and governance pieces. And so a business should then think about, from a Zambia perspective, first of all, what's the regulatory landscape? Let's start from there.
Okay.
Am I impacted by any regulation? So the Zambia Institute of Chartered Accountants has mandated that listed companies should start reporting on their sustainability efforts.
Really?
So already listed companies such as Zanaco, they've already started the journey with their integrated report that they issued most recently. But the idea is that there will be a set of companies that will be mandated, and that has already kicked in. But then even if you haven't been mandated as a business, how do you sit within the ecosystem of businesses that have been mandated? And if we take a step back to that small business, or even just a medium-sized business, if you're part of the value chain of a business that has been mandated to start this journey, that business that has been mandated to start the journey is going to have to set an ambition.
Right.
And one ambition on the E spectrum, the environmental spectrum, might be, and most likely will be something like, we want to become net zero, basically by 2050. And I think that's what we're seeing mostly. So we want to become net zero by 2050. Now, what that means is that there'll be a trickle-down effect to all the stakeholders of that business that has been mandated. So if your business is to be a supplier or a customer to that entity, you get affected, because now you have to report to that business so that that business achieves its ambition. So you have supply chain constraints that will ultimately force you as a business to start this journey. So as opposed to waiting until the hammer starts cracking and
The
we need the
outputs that Austin
numbers.
was talking about.
You anticipate it and think about, okay, I'm part of this larger value chain and I can see what's happening to this entity that is much larger, and I'll use a listed company. So what journey can I start now without having to be forced to do it quickly? I can start in small steps. Right. And then in the same vein, the financial institutions, their biggest contribution to this conversation will be financing the decarbonization. So financing our journey to net zero. And talking about definitions, net zero is really that we want to minimize and limit the increase of temperatures to 1.5 degrees Celsius. So that's the goal that the world has agreed to. Zambia is a party to that. So beyond what Zika has mandated, the government is also curating this regulatory landscape. They just recently launched their green growth strategy, where we want to transition Zambia to a low carbon economy that is socially inclusive by 2030. Now, what does that mean for my business? It means the government, through the Ministry of Green Economy, is going to issue certain policies, certain regulations that ultimately will help the country meet that ambition. And the example that Austin shared of the green loan guidelines is a product of the country moving towards adapting to climate finance and ensuring that we can finance this transition. So I think in summary, Rose, if I was a business sitting here, not mandated by some regulation, because I know we move quicker when there's a regulator chasing you, I would think more broadly about how do I sit in the wider ecosystem? Am I trading with partners, or am I looking for capital from partners that ultimately are going to expect me to start this transition and be proactive about it?
I would love for us to just really continue to unpack the case for sustainability and finance. But unfortunately, we are limited in time. It is a podcast and it's a short conversation. But in just 30 seconds, from the Zanaco perspective, Austin, for me as a small business, what 3 resources do I need in order to consider myself sustainable?
All right, great, right? So like you said, it's a journey. So it's going from not being sustainable to being sustainable, and you're allowed to be anywhere along that spectrum. So like there's no pressure. The first thing you need to understand is with your business, what are the risks, what are the opportunities? And then make a plan to limit the risks, take advantage of the opportunities, and then set some goals. And those goals are and your progress on those goals is what you want to share with financiers, with regulators, etc., as a case for, in a case, accessing financing. She already said it. As a bank, we are looking to help support customers who need financing in that way. There are other entities as well that actually are willing to give money, grants, etc., like technical support, if you're ticking those boxes. So just set your goals and tell your story, and we'll be happy to work with you.
Absolutely. And there we go. We have ticked the box today in talking about sustainable finance and reporting, a practical conversation for business. And this conversation has been so insightful and thought-provoking, only with insights shared by the head of business banking at Zanaco, Austin Chijikwa, and supported by Ms. Rabecca Hichilo Silolezia from PwC. She's an associate director and sustainability leader. We hope that you have picked up some boxes that you yourselves will tick on your sustainability journey. And remember, you heard it on Zanaco Unplugged Season 2. Until the next time, this is Rosie BC. Bye-bye for now.